Good morning, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to this week's Weekly Energy Boost. My name is Elisheva, and I am here again, lucky me, with Daniel Naor. We had such a great time last week. We decided we are just going to keep it going.
Going strong.
And the truth is, last week we ended the episode teasing our listeners about setting up a session with you. I want to make sure we talk more about that in this week's episode. And also, we're still in the month of Sagittarius, and this week's energy is, of course, there's no coincidences in it all. The fabric of the universe is woven in such a way that we're constantly being given opportunity after opportunity to do the work that unleashes our true potential, our greatness, our soul. Very beautiful slogans. But what that really means for us this week is that we are able to, in a very unique way, shift our perspective on the pain that's been inflicted on us, right? Today's topic is turning hurt into harmony. And what that really means is, piggybacking on what we talked about last week, is you change your perspective, you change your life. However, when there is emotional scars, sometimes it's easier said than done. And writing it again on the Sagittarian ability to shake things off, things are not a big deal, it's light, easy, move on. I think it's a really important conversation to have because, first of all, we want to take advantage of that ability. We all have baggage that we've been holding on to, and hurt and resentment and feelings that chances are we just don't go there because we don't want to feel it or deal with it. But as we've talked about many times, you have to feel it to heal it. And we have just this beautiful conspiration of energy from the universe to tell us it's time to move on, and here's how you can heal. So there's no better time to have Daniel again on Weekly Energy Boost. Every week on the Weekly Energy Boost, we provide our listeners with the most powerful and practical tools to navigate the coming 7 days. We do that through sharing wisdom and tools from the teachings of Kabbalah, and inevitably focusing on this week's energy. Every week's energy unearths wisdom and tools that can be used anytime. And so again, it's a great time to have this conversation, but there isn't a bad time to talk about this at all.
Always good to have me on, Elisheva.
That is true. That is very, very true. And I think also thinking about what we talked about last week, I think it's a good time to bring up the concept of tikkun, because when you take classes in Kabbalah, one of the things, I think the big shockers that comes up is that our triggers are not the problem. It's actually the reason we get triggered is because we have a tikkun. And once we work on the tikkun, we don't need the triggers anymore. And I think that that's one of those earth-shattering moments for people when they think that, I need to avoid this kind of person or this kind of situation, when you can run and you can hide, but if it's part of your tikkun, you can't run and you can't hide.
I'll catch up, usually.
Yes. So I think that that's a great place to start, especially to give context to the work that you do with students, with individuals who want to unearth the origins of those patterns and those behaviors. We all have those self-defeating behaviors and we think, I know better. Why do I do this? And there's always very deep, not only on a cellular level, but on a soul level, reasons that we keep attracting those hurts and those feelings over and over again.
Yeah. So let's dive right in. In the context of tikkun, right, that we learn as students of Kabbalah, our soul comes here with certain life lessons to learn, which is our tikkun, certain things to overcome and transform, and certain unique gifts and lights that we're meant to shine to this world. Now, the way it's set up is our soul is actually choosing most of the circumstances as far as like the environment, the family that we're born into. So let's take the example of tikkun, resentment tikkun, right? So this is something that my soul picked as a life lesson to learn. And by overcoming it, I become more aligned with my true essence and I'm able to shine my light in a more powerful way. Now, seeing this in this perspective changes everything, because if I understand that I chose my parents, as difficult as that might be to accept this idea for some, or for most of us, and that there were certain things that were done that are, by the way, never, it's not about justifying it, okay? Because our parents have their own tikkun as well. Everybody has lessons to learn. But if, let's say, for instance, my lesson is to learn or to grow from opportunities that might bring up the feelings of resentment, I always like to talk about in the sessions, oftentimes it comes up when we're dealing with certain emotions or certain beliefs, and it's a very important and powerful questions to ask, is how does it serve me and what does it cost me? And I think if we will unpack, let's say, the emotion of resentment from this perspective, I think it can give our listeners a clearer perspective and a wider view of, okay, why am I holding on to this? Is it worth it? Because let me tell you just this, and we can unpack this in a moment. The cost that specifically resentment has, it's huge. Huge.
Is your clock running? Because this is my session. No, but before you go on, and I think a lot of people are out there going, amen, you know?
Yeah.
Can you define resentment? Because I don't want to lose anyone to the idea that they might think it's not their issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
How would you define, or what does resentment include or entail?
Yeah. Resentment, so again, there are the triggers, right? Something happened to me or something was done to me, with a situation, an event, or particular individual that causes me to, we can go into other emotions, feel angry, hatred, but the bottom line of the resentment is I'm shutting out this person from my life, or I'm shutting out that event from my life. I'm pushing it away. I say unconsciously, it's a mistake. It shouldn't have happened. It's wrong. In other words, we are saying the creator made a mistake here, right? And it's so painful for me. So the only way that I'm able to deal with it, and I want to be very clear, right? Because I think it's very important when we're talking about our spiritual growth and transformation that we look, and I mentioned it in the last episode too, that we have this holistic view of everything has, first of all, and Rav Ashlag, the founder of the Kabbalah Center, talks about it too. First of all, we assume that everything has a right to exist. It's not bad that I had resentment or carried resentment, even if it was for 30 years. This is not a bad thing. I want to be very clear about it. It served a purpose. I needed that perhaps, and here we're going into and how it's serving me. I needed that perhaps in order to survive. Because there's a certain event or something that happened with an individual that was so painful for me that the only way for me have to being able to keep on going is by having the belief or carrying the emotion of resentment. And I think this is a very big difference between looking at it and say, oh, it's so bad, I want to get rid of it, versus, it had its place. And now I want to look at it from that. Do I have to still carry it with me, or are there other options there for me? But it starts with understanding, when did I adopt it? What did I need it for at that time? The problem is that when we acquire unconscious limiting beliefs, is that the subconscious mind doesn't differentiate between when you needed it when you were 10 years old, and it doesn't differentiate and doesn't recognize that you are now in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and that you have outgrown it and that you don't need it, right? It still believes you need to be protected from that person, from humiliation, from whatever that might be that might have happened, right? You want me to get going? Or
no, I just want to make sure, because I think that it doesn't matter if something was done to me or sometimes it's even not done to me. I was ignored. I was neglected. Meaning we don't have to be victims of anything in order to feel resentment. I can feel resentment because I didn't have something or I didn't experience something.
Right.
It's not just a wound that someone caused. It can be an absence of something that happened that creates that feeling.
Yes. One of the things that I come very often time across in the Tikkun healing sessions is things that weren't given to me as a child. I just had a conversation with someone or a session with someone, and they had a different set of expectation. They expected to get the love from their mother in a certain way that the mother wasn't able to give because that wasn't who she was. And she expected to get the love from her father a certain way that he wasn't able to give. And that resulted in resentment of both, right? When I have a certain expectation and I want you to give it to me in that way that in which you cannot give it to me, the result oftentimes leads so I resent you for that, right? So just to your point, it's absolutely not just the things that are done to us, but the things that weren't given to us, perhaps, that we also feel resentful for. And we can talk in a moment about the consequence or the cost that those things have.
No, I'm glad that we went there because I feel like the lack thereof, maybe people feel they might describe it as left out or ignored, but to realize you have to give the baby a name, right? So to realize you have resentment is actually what allows you to work on it. If you don't know it's there, you can't treat the wound.
Yes.
So I'm glad we could talk about that as well.
So I think it's important to see, as we said, the cost that resentment has. And again, just by talking about it, we can identify and just see the consequences that it has. And from there, perhaps make a different choice. So one of the things that I think many people don't think about, the consequence or the cost that resentment has, for whatever the reasons are, right? And there are always, good reasons, right? But at the end of the day, we are the ones that are carrying that hurt with us. It's actually our intuitive and psychic abilities. A person that walks around with a certain baggage, a certain critical mass of energy, of resentment, will be blocked psychically and with their intuitive abilities.
Wow.
And the reason is because resentment is one of the most dominant energies that occupies so much space. And if you fill all that empty space with resentment, it blocks you off. So if we understand that, right, because the beautiful thing about life is the biggest gift given to us is free will, right? Nobody can make us and no lesson in the world or greatest teacher, and we can come up with the greatest things, right, Elisheva and I, to tell you, resentment is bad. But at the end of the day, it's a choice, right? So what I oftentimes try to do in the one-on-one sessions in Tikkun Healing is just accompanying people in their process and allowing them to see what they're choosing, right? Because it might sound like but we are oftentimes not aware of what we're choosing, and we're not aware that we have alternatives, right? So if I'm becoming more aware of, I understand I have good reasons to hold on to that resentment or what wasn't given to me or what was done to me, but at the same time, a person can say, I want to be more aligned with myself. I want to get answers from the universe. I want to be guided. I want to feel connected. I want to develop my intuitive abilities. I love this idea of like being in tune with the other person and feeling them. Well, those are contradicting desires, right? You want this, but holding on to resentment, it doesn't go. It doesn't go together.
It's so powerful what you're saying. I'm thinking about people who, and it's a very specific situation, but I know so many people in this situation where they hold on to resentment as a protective mechanism so they won't be hurt again, so that they won't fall into the tricks of the other person. So I can think of a lot of people who are divorced and they hold that resentment almost like a shield between them and their ex, so that they don't get conned again, or they can't convince them to do something or to not do something. So they hold up the resentment, and they come with hostility and sort of anger to keep them from being sympathetic, being empathetic, being connecting on a meaningful level with the other person. And look at that armor. Like, it's blocking them exactly from what you're talking about. You can't you can't block your light from shining and hope that it's going to find a way to sneak in. It really is something, again, like you said, it serves you. There is a purpose for it, but the cost doesn't outweigh, the cost is too high.
Yes.
Basically is what you're saying.
Yes.
Cost doesn't justify
Yes.
the service.
Yes. If you think about it in this way, resentment is really an energy of death. And I say it it might sound very dramatic, but what do I mean by that, the energy of death? Resentment keeps you away from experiencing the other person. It keeps you away from connection, and it keeps you away from getting to know the world of the other and connecting to the other person. And so we need to be very clear that the way that we receive light and energy in the light of the Creator, there are two ways of thinking. One is vertically, that we receive it from source energy directly from the universe, light of the Creator, whatever you want to call it. And in that perspective, in that mindset, what do I need others for? So in that perspective, I have the right to be resentful. Look what they did to me or what they didn't give me. And I don't need them because I have source energy, right? My connection is vertically and I can connect anytime. Wrong. Because our connection is actually horizontally. And we receive every person, as insignificant it might look like, acquaintances even. Of course, the more blood related and the more closer they are to us, like family and friends, the more significant, the more energy and light is there. But every person in our life is there for a reason, and every person in our life holds light that we need in our life. So what happens is when I'm cutting someone off, right? We're not in the month of Scorpio anymore, but they're very, very
extreme. We talked about it.
Okay, all right.
Let's leave the Scorpios alone for a little while.
Give them a break. Next year we'll come back to them.
Yes.
Well, I put someone on the blacklist, or just like I don't need to take this anymore, right? And which, by the way, is a difference between, you might not need to be in constant communication with them, but we're talking about how do I conduct and hold myself internally.
Even at the thought of them.
Yeah, you might not need to be around or even communicate with them, but if inside my feeling is, the shutting them out and anger and resentment, that also means that there is some light that the Creator wants to give me, but I'm not allowing that flow to reach me, the flow of life and energy, because I carry that resentment. And that's what I mean by resentment is the energy of death, because I'm not allowing the natural flow of the people around us, of life to reach me.
So what you're saying is it's okay to take space from a person without harboring the resentment.
Right.
That's the work, is releasing the resentment. You can still decide you're not going to engage with them.
Right.
But the resentment isn't only blocking you from them, it's blocking you from light and connection with others.
Yeah, and that is for friends, but it's even more so oftentimes in my work, in the sessions, we're talking about family dynamics and the importance of different people and different roles that they have. So talking about our parents, when that resentment is felt with our parents, it's has very, very extreme consequences. In a sense, because physically our parents gave us the gift of life, and spiritually also that energy, they were chosen as the channels from which this life force reached us. And if whatever stands between me and my parents, for all the good reasons, and I know there are crazy stories out there, and I've heard many, nevertheless, whatever stands between me emotionally or in my belief system that doesn't allow me to take life and the flow of life from my parents. And here we're giving the example of resentment. They didn't give me the love that I was looking for. I wasn't really fully seen. I wasn't fully heard. They didn't believe in me, or I was whatever. And no, there's no such thing as perfect parents, right? No such thing.
Hey, I am a perfect parent.
Except
Daniel.
Elisheva Balas.
I resent that.
Except Elisheva Balas. We're talking about the cost, right? Is that, and I see it over and over and over again, the relationship or the mental view that we have of our mother and father is the relationship that we will form. It's the template with all other relationships that we will have in life. So if I cannot receive the life and love that my mother have given me, it will affect the way that I'll be able to take love from my partner. It will affect the way that I'll be able to form communication and depth and intimacy with my friends. If I'm not able to take in life and love from my father, for whatever the reason, it will affect the way. There are many ways it can affect, but we receive different energies from mother and father. Even Kabbalistically, we know from our mother we receive inner light, and from our father we receive surrounding light. That has different ramifications, but the father figure has an energy, has all to do with going out into the world, maintaining things, travel, providing success, structure, constant learning. If we are unable to take the flow of life from our father, it can affect these areas in our life, in our feeling of confidence in how we go out into the world. So we might feel more insecure. We might feel more needing to protect ourselves or unsafe. And oftentimes we don't realize that it has a lot to do with the mental view that we have of our mother and father, or what's in the way. So resentment is a huge thing. So reason why we're giving this context now again is saying a person can be resentful for what the parents did to them or didn't provide for them for years, not realizing how much it cost them, how much they're paying for that in their intimacy level, in their feeling of safety, or how they relate to others in the world at large.
So how do you transform resentment? I mean, I know you probably can't give a fully applicable blanket statement for every form of resentment with every individual, but what does transformed resentment look and feel like?
I think the first step, and many times the place I gently guide people towards, is trying to put myself in the other person's shoe. Now, we cannot do that as a child, and that's why I say resentment, every stage has a purpose. So the fact that I had resentment, that's okay, right? But later on, with greater awareness, if it comes to me, I can look at it in a different way. And the first place to start with is with compassion. Compassion meaning putting myself into the other person's shoes. Oftentimes I ask the people that come to me when we're talking about issues with family or mother and father, I ask them more about their parents. Saying like, really, that's interesting. Like, what happened to them? How was your mom's childhood? What did she went through? What did your dad went through? Oh, he was in the war. Oh, he lost all of his friends. Oh, they lived in poverty, and he was the oldest one. He needed to provide for. Interesting. What do you like? So the more we start digging into that, and we're having a more compassionate eye, and we're asking, that helps us to understand. Again, never to justify whatever happened or didn't happen, but at least to look at it with a kinder eye and to understand, okay, you know what, they did the best they could with what was given to them. And that's the only thing that they were able to pass on, especially under the context with Kabbalistic understanding it's part of Tikkun. I can take that. I can accept that. So I think it's too much of an ask when we approach trying to overcome resentment, when we ask, or just diving right into forgiveness, that's too big of an ask. But if we start with compassion and putting ourselves into their shoes and start with acceptance.
I was going to say, it sounds like acceptance is the first step, and then you can move into what, the specifics and the details and what happened. But to me, there are a lot of people I've encountered over, in the years that I've been working with students that actually have resentment toward the creator or toward the universe, not necessarily to a specific situation or person, but the hand they were dealt is more where the resentment is. That, I've met people with chronic pain and issues that just, actually thinking about someone whose mother was horribly abusive. And I do think she's gotten to the level of acceptance where she knows that her mom was doing the best that she can, but I don't know if she's reconciled it in a cosmic way. Why did she deserve that? And there's resentment there. So when it comes to handling put the resentment and everything that Daniel said on a shelf for a second. When we talk about transformation or change of any form, it always starts with acceptance. You can't convert something that you refuse to accept, right? So the first thing that Daniel actually spoke about was acknowledging, what does acceptance mean? It already happened, which means that's exactly how it had to happen. I don't need to know why. I might never know why. But now that I've acknowledged that that's what needed to be, what can I do with that information? How can I move forward with it? How can I use it to learn about myself and others? Going back to what you said last week, the curiosity piece, right? Imagine if you were reading about it in a book or watching it in a movie, wouldn't you be more curious than resentful about why it happened and how it happened and how it can serve you and how it takes on a whole different flavor when it's not personal. And being able to use that observational tool, if you want to call it that, to help you get perspective, to allow you to accept it, and then to do the work. Because sometimes it's so painful that it's hard to accept that there is a creator that would ever allow that software to be installed. And I always get that the question, it's very nice you talk about me and my family or my family and what happened to them, but there's terrible things happening in the world. How are we supposed to accept that, or how can we justify that? So we're more talking here, I think, about the personal. I think it's, what am I trying to say? Don't try to copy and paste what we're talking about to the state of the world. Yeah. That's what I mean. We're not talking about incidences of global proportion. We're talking about personal tikkun and transformation. And maybe we could talk at a future date about global proportion resentment and hurt and pain. But this is really intended, it sounds like a pharmaceutical commercial,
Disclaimer.
Yeah, this information is intended for use. Please contact your medical professional. We really do intend this, these ideas, these concepts, and these tools to help you as an individual process your tikkun rather than to process the tikkun of a country or a people or even sometimes I look back on historical events. My kids are in grade school and middle school, and sometimes they have to learn about history, and I'm just like, can't we not teach them about that? That's was such a weak point in humanity. Why do we have to? But obviously you have to, because we don't want it to happen again. But it's almost like I'm embarrassed to be a human sometimes when we talk about different things that have happened throughout history. We are definitely talking about using this on a micro level rather than a macro. Disclaimer over.
All right,
Mike, back to you.
Where did we leave off? I don't remember.
Well, I was asking you. I was asking you about the transformation process, and you were talking about acceptance.
Yes. So, not sure where to go from here.
Well, I think that there's two things that come to mind when I think about hurt and resentment, and I don't want to take you off your track. I'll just talk until you get back into the swing. and this maybe sounds self-helpy and mumbo-jumbo-y, but when you look at the expense or the cost of harboring resentment and hurt, right? And Daniel spoke about many different ways that it can affect us. The reality is that, what's the famous phrase? It's like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die, right? You're the only one that's suffering. And the truth is you're not. You're probably coloring other people's perspective and experience with your resentment, right? I remember, without getting into all the details, I knew somebody who was going through a divorce that couldn't help but talk badly about her soon-to-be ex, who was, what ends up happening when two people break up is that all their friends kind of get divvied up between them. And it was very difficult to listen to her slander him. not he's a horrible person, but he did this again and he did that again, and she wasn't underhanded. She was simply talking about what she went through, but you can't help, when you hear those things, you can't help but allow it to color your perspective. So it not only hurts you, it hurts the people around you, but even more than that, if you're on a spiritual journey and you're looking to experience more of the light force of the Creator in your life, what's involved is looking at all the things that are not light-like in your life. And that goes back to what you said in the beginning, right? You want to have more intuition, clarity, guidance, feeling support from the universe. The two are mutually exclusive. You can't have both, and you've got to choose. And I think a lot of us go through that sort of reckoning when we realize the different negative things that we do that are contrary to what we're really working towards, the behaviors that we have to transmute, if you want to use a fancy word, so that we're no longer canceling out the goodness and the light that we're trying to create. So it is also, to me, a part of taking stock and realizing, if I want to move forward here, I can't leave that part of me behind. I've got to bring it with me. And to do the work that Daniel is talking about, moving through, I don't know, can you give an example? Maybe that's the most practical thing we can do. Can you think of someone that you've done this work with in Tikkun healing sessions and how it looked for them to move through the stages from resentment to wherever they are now, even if they're not fully, they haven't fully left it behind?
I think an important part of the process that I also guide people through when resentment or similar things like that, or difficult events in general, sometimes there are difficult events that happened to us in the past, and we didn't allow ourselves to process them. So we keep on going with life, but the emotional wounds and it's sort of like time stood still and we're still there, and we don't realize that we're carrying it with us. So we haven't found a good place for that event in our system, so to speak, or we're not sure in how to accommodate that event in our space, in our soul. So oftentimes the process will look like feel it to heal it, right? Revisiting those places, but now from a different place, from the person that I am today, with a different perspective, with more tools. And I think another part that we didn't mention is very, very important to bring in as well, and let the person realize and let ourselves realize. Because what happens most of the time with resentment, anger, or hurt is that and it's human nature, we all do it, that we are focusing on only the bad, right? So it might be a relationship, let's say, of 20 years, and then they stabbed you in the back, and then 20 years of friendship out the window, right? The only thing that we can remember is that hurtful moment. And I challenge people and ask them, what happened to the other 20 years? Were there some good times? Were there some good moments? Did you have some... So you're talking about divorce, right? Like, let's say someone was, and I can think of a specific example, where they were married for many years, and without getting into the details, cheating and etc. And of course, human nature, right? Like, the only thing that she could remember was the pain and the hurt, right? And the resentment needed to build up, like the things that we talked about from before, to protect herself from that. Now, the perspective that there's more to it, but a few nuggets that I'll share about this is because there are also children involved. And when we're dealing with a couple that marriage and there were children, we want to look at all of that. We want to look at, because at some point there was love. And that love was real too. And we cannot just ignore it or put it away because one thing, as much as painful
not
it
to
might
negate that one thing.
Not to negate that one thing, right? But if we were to acknowledge the hurtful things, then we need to be fair to ourselves and also take in all the good times, all the memorable times, the love, the experiences that we had together, the children that we had together, right? Because oftentimes you hear it also in the language that people use, sometimes even before divorce they say it, but especially after they say like, my children, my kids, my daughter, my son. Yeah, you had them by yourself? You had them on your own?
In a vacuum.
In a vacuum? Like, to acknowledge all of that. And it takes, I'll be honest, it's not easy work. And that's why, one-on-one and having the time for it is important. I think it's difficult to do this type of thing by ourselves if we have someone to guide us with that. It takes an open heart, a certain vulnerability, a certain openness to admit to ourselves and to make room in our heart to include these memorable times, those experiences, and to give them a space in our heart. So if we can acknowledge that already widens our heart and by itself can give less meaning or significance to or the need for the resentment, because I incorporate also the other elements, the other parts at times that we have shared, and we realize, okay, wow, like we had kids together, and I cherish it, and there's certain experiences that I give it a place in my heart, and I carry it with me, and even though, and here's a statement that sometimes I give to people in a visualization. It helps people to see it from a different perspective, and I have them close their eyes and look at maybe a partner or a friend and say, the same force that brought us together is the same force that separated us.
Wow.
It makes it less personal. So it's realized there's a greater force. There were lessons that we needed to learn. There were good times. There were bad times. Now we're separated. But it's that force that brought us together, that separated us. And usually the effect when a person says it from the heart in that space, the effect it has, it softens the heart. It brings in more acceptance. And it allows the person to say, maybe it's not worth it to carry that anger, that resentment, those bad memories. Like, I can hold a different space in my heart for
just
that.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about the space that resentment occupies, like you were talking about in the beginning. And when it's no longer occupying that space, how much more room for joy and fulfillment you have.
Yeah.
Like you can't, again, it's, okay, I want intuition and I want what you spoke about in the beginning, but it's such a heavy burden to drag around. And it really is, if you don't consciously release it, it's like in the back, sometimes you throw things in the back of the car and you forget that they're there. It's still there. Just because you forget it's there doesn't mean it's gone.
Yeah.
And it comes up and it unfortunately can rear its ugly head in the most inopportune times with the wrong people. And so I think that, first of all, thank you for listening to my therapy session, everyone. My tikkun healing. Thank you, Daniel, for sharing all that with us. I don't think you even realize how healing and transformative what you shared was, because I think it's going to help a lot of people just with even if you only listen to the last 3 minutes of the episode, bomb. Just beautiful.
Thank you.
So again, if you'd like to schedule a session with Daniel or any of our instructors who offer tikkun healing sessions, we have them in, I think, English, Spanish, Hebrew, Portuguese. Is there anyone that does it in Portuguese?
With translator, I think.
Oh, okay. So only with translator. Sorry.
German, but
German.
But
primitive German.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta Gotta be patient with my German.
Patient German. Tikkun healing
I did it twice, I think, in German.
I always say when people ask me how, if I speak another language, the other languages I speak like a 12-year-old. So as long as you're okay with that.
Hebrew easier for me, but
there you go.
English
Me too.
easiest, but yeah.
Anyway, those are they're invaluable sessions. You can sign up for single sessions or multiple sessions, right?
Yeah.
With the
3
discount
package,
code.
6 package.
Very powerful work. Everyone that I know that's done it is forever impacted by that work, and it really does continue. Even though the sessions may be 1 or 3 or 6, the impact of those sessions continues well after the sessions are over. And you can find out all about that at weeklyenergyboost.com, where you can also find all the things that we think are interesting for our listeners to talk about. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, as well as wherever you listen to podcasts. And on weeklyenergyboost.com, you can also click the donate button and support our podcast. But really the best thing you can do to support us is to continue to share the episode with not only people that you love, but maybe people that you resent. and give them the hint.
Especially those.
Give them the hint, or people that resent you. People that resent
Send
you could highly benefit from this episode. As always, Daniel, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next week on the Weekly Energy Boost.